This is the entire One Piece timeline. It spans for over 5,000 years and includes every important event that has ever happened in the story. And today, I'll explain the entire thing from start to finish in chronological order so it's very simple to follow along. Throughout the video, there will also be a timeline animation at the bottom of the screen so you can easily keep track of exactly when are certain events taking place. In order to start from the very beginning, we need to go back around 5,000 years, when Ohada's great tree of omniscience was planted in the ground and became the foundation for the library. Then, 1,000 years after that, Alaparna Palace was constructed and thus began the Kingdom of Alabasta. It was established when a person named Kahira conquered Sandy Island. A calendar starting at year 0 was established 1,524 years before the main story, which is gonna make keeping track of everything much simpler from now on. The next thing we know is that around year 400, the Moon People were beginning to run out of resources and decided to migrate down to the Blue Star. On the moon, they lived in a giant city called Burka. They were highly advanced and had even built a legion of robot-like creatures called automatas. When they arrived on Earth, the three Moon People tribes split up. The Burkans and the Skypians decided to stay on the Sky Islands, while the Shandorians decided to live on Jaya. Then around the year 500, a huge elephant named Zunesha was born somewhere in the New World. This was also around the same time the Long Arm tribe and the Long Leg tribe started their war against each other for God knows what reason.
Since you're watching this video, I assume you like epic battles and badass powers. And if I'm right, there's one game that you guys need to try out. I was also able to get some cool rewards for you, so make sure to stick around till the end. Thanks Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video, and special thanks to Universal Studios Licensing. Raid is currently partnering with Universal Products and Experiences and Mattel to bring He-Man and Skeletor to the game as legendary champions. Man, these two take me right back to my childhood. And the best thing is that you can get Skeletor for free simply by logging into Raid on 14 days between November 25th and January 8th. Players can also complete the Champion Pass to get the legendary champion, He-Man. The main reason I like Raid is because it has an endless amount of content. Right now is the best time to start playing Raid, and if you click my link in the description or scan my QR code, you'll immediately get some crazy bonuses, like a huge starter pack including epic champion Tagoar. And after reaching level 15, you'll get another pack containing epic Grizzled Jarl. If you download the game through my link, use promo code MonkeyKing to get a legendary champion Sun Wukong for free. Only available till January 7th. Make sure to join my clan Yeagerists YT, and I'll see you in game.
In the year 600, the Dressrosa Palace was built. The country was established and governed by the Don Quixote family that lived on Dressrosa Island at the time. King Don Quixote was soon visited by a traveling band of dwarves called Tontadas, who left their homeland behind in order to search for resources and shelter. By pretending to care and offering to help, the king enslaved the Tontada tribe for centuries and forced them to build Dressrosa into a prosperous city. Although not confirmed, the ancient kingdom was most likely established around the same time, with several nations of the world coming together to share their technological advancements. The people of this kingdom had access to the 3 ancient weapons, which are rumored to have godly powers. Another thing that most likely happened before the Void Century began was the creation of devil fruits. As Vegapunk explained, they were brought into existence by people's unfulfilled wishes and desires for the future. The One Piece world also established a global currency at the time called berry. After berries became a thing, the era of slaves began. The slaves and the oppressed came to idolize and pray to the sun god who they believed would come to liberate them from their oppressors. Somewhere around this time, a person called Joy Boy, who wore a straw hat, set out to sea and became the first pirate. At some point, he also ate the devil fruit called the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika. During his travels, Joy Boy befriended Zunesha and the Iron Giant, Emmet. Back then, Fishman Island was the only place where fishmen gathered in order to bask in the sunlight that came from the sun tree Eve. It was a settlement they established under the sea to avoid the persecution they faced on land. Joy Boy visited the island and promised he'd raise the giant ship Noah to the surface, a promise he was not able to keep for an unknown reason. During his journeys, Joy Boy arrived on a certain island in the New World which would later be known as Laugh-Tale. On it, Joy Boy hid his treasure. Although we don't know what it is, it was described as something that could completely turn the world upside down. After that, Joy Boy had a citizen of Wano write the poneglyphs for him, with one outlining his apology to the fishmen for not being able to fulfill his promise, and promising that someone would fulfill it in the future. He left another message at the unnamed island claiming that he would return in 800 years. A few years later, for some reason, 20 kingdoms around the world banded together and waged war against Joy Boy in an effort to kill him and destroy the ancient kingdom. This new coalition of kingdoms eventually succeeded, but before their demise, Joy Boy's allies managed to hide the ancient weapons so they wouldn't end up in the wrong hands. Sometime before his defeat, Joy Boy locked a huge amount of his hockey inside of Emmet and told him to use it in the future if he's in danger or wants to save somebody else. Zunesha might have also played a role in Joy Boy's downfall, since the elephant was cursed to wander the seas for eternity as punishment for its betrayal. Due to the events of this war, the world's water level also rose by 200 meters, sinking many continents in the process. After achieving their goal, the 20 kings wiped out the Lunarians that lived in the god country of Lunaria on top of the Red Line and moved with their families there. There, they established their capital city, 𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐻, and became known as the World Nobles, or the Celestial Dragons. However, one of those nobles decided that living on top of the world and acting as a god wasn't really her thing, so she decided to stay back on the mainland instead. That person was Nefertari D. Lily, the princess of Alabasta Kingdom who defected from the 20 Kingdoms coalition and became responsible for spreading poneglyphs detailing the real history of the world around the sea. After this, she mysteriously vanished at sea and never returned to Alabasta. She's also the first ever person to have the moniker of D. Any documents that mentioned her were immediately destroyed and her younger brother became the new king. Following these events, the coalition of 20 kingdoms rebranded as the world government and started erasing from history everything that's happened in the last 100 years, including Joy Boy, the Will of D, the Ancient Kingdom, and the ancient weapons. This erased part of history became known as the Void Century, and any research into it was considered one of the worst crimes possible, punishable by death. Since the Don Quixote royal family left Dressrosa to live on the Red Line, the Riku family took over and fostered a healthy, sincere relationship with the Tontada tribe. During this time, Joy Boy's allies in Wano hid Pluton away inside Wano's underground caverns. The Water 7 shipwrights who built Pluton also decided to hide the existence of the weapon's blueprints, while Fishman Island protected Poseidon and Noah with their lives. This was also presumably done to preserve these weapons for Joy Boy's eventual return. Led by the mysterious figure Imu, who's believed to be one of the 20 kings, the world government would go on to rule the world with an iron fist for the next 800 years. Ennis Lobby was built to carry out the world government's judicial procedures, while cipher pulls were established to act as the government's intelligence agencies. Noticing the rising water level around the year 800, the world government started the construction of massive bridges known as Tequila Wolf, Vodka Wolf, Rum Wolf, and Bourbon Wolf. The construction was done by slaves from the countries that didn't submit to the government's rule. At some point close to the year 1000, an ancient giant named 𝐿 was born. He was larger than any current known giant in the story and was called the Continent Puller. Legend has it that he amassed countries and islands under his control and his band of villains. Eventually, 𝐿 froze to death somewhere near the northern pole as he was unprepared for the frozen climate, having worn only a loincloth. It's estimated that around the year 1100, a giant dragon laid siege to the country of Wano and was later cut down by the legendary swordsman, sword god Shimotsuki Ryuma with his great blade, 𝐶hussui. Then in the year 1122, an adventurer and botanist named Mont Blanc Noland went on an expedition on the Grand Line. During his travels, he saved the Tontadas on Greenbit against tyrants who were terrorizing their island. Eventually, he wound up making landfall on the shores of Jaya. After befriending a local girl and saving her from becoming a sacrifice to some giant snake, Noland convinced her father to let him treat the Shandians who were dying from the tree fever plague. In exchange for his treatment, the Shandians let Noland visit the lost city of gold, Shandia, and grew very fond of him. 4 years later, the knock-up stream launched Shandia all the way up to Skypia. The Skypians saw Shandia as a sacred land, rich with resources, and decided to invade. This started a 400-year war between the two tribes. Meanwhile, Noland came home and told the king of Lynel about the ancient city of gold that he had found. Intrigued, the king wanted to go to Jaya and see it for himself. Unaware that the island was now in the sky, Noland led the king there only to realize that the city and its people had disappeared. Thinking that Noland made the entire thing up, the furious king ordered his execution. Noland was branded Noland the Liar, and his family was ridiculed and exiled from the kingdom. Another 2 centuries later, Emmet, the iron giant Joy Boy was friends with, mysteriously awakens and starts wreaking havoc on 𝐵𝐴𝐺𝐺. But before he could do any large-scale damage, he ran out of power and turned off. Saint Saturn tasked his science division to hide the robot and research it in secret, even though they had clear orders from the world government to destroy it. Somewhere around the year 1400, the pirate group known as the Giant Warrior Pirates lay waste all over the Grand Line. It was around the same time that a giant named Morley was captured and imprisoned in level 5 of Impel Down. Using his devil fruit abilities, he made his escape in secret and created tunnels that came to be known as level 5.5 of the prison. Meanwhile, the co-captains of the Giant Warrior Pirates, Dory and Brogy, had a disagreement and began their legendary 100-year duel on Little Garden. Without their captains, the rest of the crew were captured and almost executed by the world government. However, before that could happen, Mother Carmel advocated for their release and safely brought them back to Elbap. Then, working together with Cypherpole, Carmel opened an orphanage on the island to export orphan children as slaves. Around the same time, the Kingdom of Flavens started mining white amber lead, despite finding out that it's poisonous to humans. I'm sure this won't have any serious consequences in the future. Anyways, In 1443 on Wano, the lord of the Kurozumi family poisoned 4 other lords in order to gain power over the region and become shogun. Unfortunately for him, an heir to the Kozuki family was born, which derailed his plans for ascension. Following the uncovering of his plot, the lord committed seppuku out of shame, while the rest of the family was hunted down and killed on the spot. The Sphinx Island became too poor to be affiliated with the world government around the year 1450. The resulting chaos led Edward Newgate, who was born in that year, to become an orphan. 7 years after that, somewhere in the New World, 𝐿𝐷𝑒𝑟𝑒𝑠 constructed Witheria and decided to study the weather on the floating island with his colleague. A few years later in 1461, at Elbath, Charlotte Lindling gets abandoned by her parents, which results in her being taken to Mother Caramel's orphanage. After struggling to control herself through a fast, Lindling goes on a destructive spree and winds up killing one of the former giant warrior pirate captains, Jarul. Furious, the giants eventually decided to let Lindling live at the behest of Mother Caramel, but with the condition to move her orphanage to another island. A year later, during another one of her hunger pains, Lindling ends up eating all of her fellow orphans along with Mother Caramel. This resulted in her getting the powers of the Soru Soru no Mi, which was the devil fruit Mother Caramel ate in the past. After some time, Lindling came across a young pirate named Strusen who saw potential in her powers and decided to team up with her. In 1469, the legendary swordmaker from Wano, Kozaburo, decided to leave the country with 24 other people despite not being allowed to. The group then traveled to the East Blue. Upon arrival, Kozaburo drove away a bunch of bandits with the help of the locals and founded Shimotsugi village. A year later, Kurozumi Orochi is born and lives a hard life because of being persecuted for his lineage. On a mission to find their captains in 1472, the giants Oimo and Kashi get duped into becoming the gatekeepers of Enies Lobby by the world government, who lied about releasing their captured captains if they do so. In reality, Dori and Brogi were still dueling on Little Garden. In the same year, the Rumbar pirates came across a lost whale, Baboon, near the entrance to the Grand Line. After making friends with the whale, the crew promised Baboon that they would be back and continued their journey. However, not long after that, in 1474, the Rumbar pirates met their abrupt end on the Grand Line after losing their captain to an illness and being showered by an avalanche of poisoned arrows. However, due to his revived devil fruit, Brook was the only member of the crew to survive. At the same time, Goldie Roger was making a name for himself as a strong rookie pirate along with his right-hand man, Silvers Rayleigh. Soon after forming a crew, they had Tom, a shipwright from Water 7, construct an amazing ship for them made out of wood from the treasure tree Adam, named the Oro Jackson. A year later in the Vodka Kingdom, a child named Kaido turned 10 years old and was already considered the kingdom's strongest soldier. The year 1480 was the start of the era of rocks. The famous pirate, Rox D. Zebek, occupied an island named Hachinasu and started gathering the strongest pirates for his crew there. That same year, Edward Newgate, now known as Whitebeard, met Kaido on Hachinasu and convinced him to join Rock's crew together. Lindling also joined Rock's crew at a similar time. A year after that, Kuma and his family had their blood test details leaked and wound up being sold off as slaves to the Celestial Dragons for being buccaneers. This resulted in both of Kuma's parents dying during the next 4 years. During that time, a couple more things happened. A group of settlers founded Orange Town on the East Blue. Shakuyaku retired as a pirate and opened up her own bar on Sabaody Archipelago, while Kurozumi Higurashi returned to Wano in order to stage a coup with a young Orochi. Then finally, in 1485, Roger and his crew finally reached Lodestar, the last island that the log pose pointed to. Around that time, the rich emperor of the underground, called Lu Feld, founded the Mad Science Group. The members of this group were Cian, Vegapunk, Judge, Caesar, and Buckingham Stussy, and the group did illegal scientific research. In Wano, Kozuki Oden finally received the title of Lord for taking over and reforming a lawless region of the island called Kuri. A year later, the Celestial Dragons somehow got hold of devil fruits stolen from Hachinosu. They put them up as a prize for the winner of their hunting tournament on God Valley. Angry at the government, Rox and his crew decide to invade the island in order to retrieve their devil fruits. Learning that Rox is on the island, Roger pirates arrive as well, which started a legendary duel between the two crews. Eventually, Monkey D. Garp sided with Roger, and together they managed to take Rox down. During the conflict, the 3 slaves Ginny, Kuma, and Ivankov managed to free themselves and steal the devil fruits that were meant to be the tournament's prizes. Lindling suddenly appeared and managed to steal the Ui no Mi Ivankov was holding, but before she could do the same to Kuma, the boy managed to eat it. In the aftermath, it was confirmed that Rox allegedly died during the battle, and his name was completely erased from history. Also, the entire island was destroyed by the government. While making his escape, Roger found a baby in one of the chests he plundered and decided to name him Shanks. With the era of Rox finished, the era of Roger started. After the legendary battle on God's Valley, Garp was given all the credit for Rock's downfall and was named Hero of the Marines. At some point after the God Valley incident, Kaido was imprisoned and taken to Punk Hazard, where Dr. Vegapunk experimented on him in order to clone his devil fruit. However, it was unsuccessful, and Kaido managed to escape while also freeing Arbor. Arbor is one of the few Lunarians left in the world after the world government exterminated them during the Void Century. After escaping together, Kaido told Arbor that he was planning on starting his own crew and asked him to join him. Thus, the Beast Pirates were formed. In the meantime, other former members of Rock's crew, Linlin and Whitebeard, also decided to start their own crews, creating the Big Bomb Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates. In 1491, the Don Quixote family, consisting of 𝐕𝐵𝐴𝐴, his brother Rocinante, mother and father, renounced their titles as celestial dragons and decided to live the rest of their lives with other humans. However, they soon got punished for their lineage and were driven into a life of poverty. To add to 𝐕𝐵𝐴�'s misery, his mother died from an illness. After escaping from God Valley, Kuma and Ginny settled down in the Sorbet Kingdom. There, Kuma used his devil fruit powers to help the elderly people of the kingdom by enduring their pain for them. In 1494, Kozuki Oden finally managed to get his chance to leave the country after being visited by Whitebeard's crew. After enduring a tough trial, the samurai saves Toki and gains permission to join the crew. With Oden out at the sea, Kaido rendezvous with his old ally Higurashi on Wano and conspires to take over the country. 2 years later, in 1496, Roger gets a fatal illness that shortens his lifespan greatly. This prompts him to recruit Crocus as his ship's doctor and set sail for one last grand adventure. This same year, Nigo Ovia sets out to sea in order to research the poneglyphs, and Doflamingo kills his own father. By the next year, Roger faced off against Golden Lion Shiki, an extremely dangerous pirate who boasted a massive armada. They faced off in the massive battle known as the Eddy War. Their battle was cut short, however, after a weather incident destroyed half of Shiki's forces and lodged a ship's steering wheel permanently into the back of his head. In 1498, Cian, one of the former Mads members, abandons his 10-year-old child and decides to join the Beast Pirates, changing his name to Queen. Coincidentally, at exactly the same time, a 10-year-old boy named Cutty Flam is found abandoned at sea by the famous shipwright Tom. I'll let you make your own conclusions about that. Anyway, the Roger Pirates clash off on an epic battle against the Whitebeard Pirates that lasts 3 days and 3 nights. By the end of it, Rogers formally asks Oden to join his crew after asking Whitebeard for permission. Inarashi and Nekomamushi decide to tag along too. Within the span of a few short months, the crew reaches the poneglyphs at Skypia and Oden is asked to write Rogers' message on it. Rogers also visits Zoe and inspires a young Pedro. During that time, Mads was officially dissolved and Borsalino was sent to arrest Vegapunk. However, Vegapunk wasn't fazed by this because he knew that the government actually wanted to hire him as their own scientist rather than arrest him. This is eventually what happened, with both Vegapunk and Caesar Clown joining the government's research team. He later adopted Sentomaru and made him his bodyguard after he was exiled from his village for being too strong. Borsalino, who has by now become a good friend of Vegapunk, decided to train the boy. Whilst working for the government, Vegapunk received a visit from Professor Clover of Ohara, who begged him for his help with uncovering the truth behind the poneglyphs. Dr. Vegapunk promptly refused. Another year later, Monkey D. Dragon started a paramilitary mercenary group of pirates called the Freedom Fighters. They staged several protests across the world and inspired people like Kuma to fight for the oppressed. They also asked Vegapunk to join their cause, but again, he refused. In the same year, the Roger Pirates finally finished their grand voyage and conquered the Grand Line by making it all the way to Laugh Tale with Oden's help. While they were celebrating, however, Oden's country, Wano, was facing a coup by the Beast Pirates that almost led to the death of Oden's wife and child. Shortly after the end of their journey, the Roger Pirates disbanded and all of them went their own separate ways, with their captain turning himself in to the Marines. While imprisoned, Roger asked his longtime rival Garp to take care of his son, Ace. Garp, of course, accepted. Upon returning to Wano, Oden realized what had happened in his absence and immediately rushed to kill Orochi, but before he could do that, Orochi threatened to kill a bunch of civilians. He then says that if Oden dances naked in the flower capital once a week, they'll be spared. He also promises Oden that he and Kaido would leave Wano in 5 years. In order to save as many people as possible, Oden danced in the capital every week, causing the people of Wano to lose faith and respect for him. Meanwhile, Shiki invades Marineford, furious at the thought that Roger was captured by the Marines, asking Sengoku to bring him out so Shiki could kill him himself. This led to a huge-scale battle where Shiki took on both Sengoku and Garp. He eventually lost and was sent to Impel Down. The following week, Roger was set to be executed in his hometown, Logetown. On the platform, as the blades were about to impale him, Roger was asked a question by someone in the crowd about the location of his hidden treasure. While laughing, Roger looked down at the crowd and said, "You want my treasure? Well, you can have it. I've left everything the world has to offer there. The One Piece." Roger's words ignited a flame inside the hearts of the common folk, and they kickstarted the Great Pirate Era, where more pirates started popping up than ever before, all with the goal of finding Roger's legendary treasure. It's unknown when, but soon after Roger's death, Shanks went and formed a crew of his own called the Red-Haired Pirates, and he even invited Buggy to join him, but was turned down. Soon, Oden receives the news of Roger's death and weeps at the loss of his friend. The next year, Gekko Moria, a famous rookie pirate, invaded Wano and stole Ryoma's body and his blade Shisui. Moria's and Kaido's forces clashed with each other, but in the aftermath, Moria's crew was completely destroyed, with him being the only survivor. One more year later, 𝐂𝐫𝐴 slips up during her journey to decipher the poneglyphs and gets captured by the Marines. On Vice Admiral Jaguar D. Saul's ship, 𝐂𝐫𝐴 is later freed by the giant who was against the slaughter of innocents who simply wanted to study the history of the world. On the run, Saul and 𝐂𝐫𝐴 take a ship back to Ohara to warn the residents. There, Professor Clover is confronted by the Marines and gets shot for almost revealing the true name of the ancient kingdom. Claiming they know too much, the 𝐿𝐾𝐄 give permission to launch a buster call on the entire island. Saul, who had previously managed to befriend Olivia's daughter, Nico Robin, lays down his life in order to protect her from the raining hellfire. After coming face to face with his old friend 𝐂𝐮, the giant is frozen in place while 𝐂𝐮 spares Robin's life and allows her to escape. In the end, the island is completely destroyed and all of its inhabitants massacred. However, before they completely perished, the residents of Ohara threw as many books as they could in the water in order to preserve all the information they uncovered about the world. The events of that day would later come to be known as the Ohara Incident. A couple of more notable things that happened during this are that Gaimon got trapped inside a treasure chest, Shiki escaped Impel Down after cutting off his own legs, and Roger's son Ace was born, but his wife died somewhere in the South Blue after giving birth. Anyways, Kuma finally gets fed up with the King of Sorbit's ruthless actions and decides to retaliate, but gets promptly captured with Ginny and put in prison. Sometime later, Monkey D. Dragon and 𝐿𝐾𝐜 freed Kuma and Ginny from the jail cell and helped them make the king back off. They rebrand the freedom fighters as the Revolutionary Army. They did this not only to ramp up their efforts to dismantle the government, but also to commemorate the massacre of Ohara. A few months later, Vegapunk decides to visit Ohara to put flowers on Professor Clover's grave. After coming upon a lake, he's shocked to witness the giants from Elbath gathering all the books that were thrown out into the water. Dragon meets Vegapunk there and explains that the giants were saving these books because they're aware of the value they hold. Following their talk, the scientist laments over his refusal to join the freedom fighters back then. In the year 1503, Sanji and his brothers were born and became the first superhuman beings created by Judge Vinsmoke. Their mother died, however, after taking a drug that suppressed her experimental treatment. Another year later, around 5 years after his return to Wano, Odin heard that Hyogoro had been captured for his defiance and that his wife was killed. Grieving over the fate of Hyogoro and his wife, Odin finally decided to gather his retainers and attempt to save his country from Kaido's tyranny. He blasted through Kaido's army, surprising everyone with his strength. However, before he could deal a finishing blow, he was tricked by Higurashi, which allowed Kaido to defeat him. Odin and his retainers were then imprisoned and sentenced to be boiled alive. However, Odin made a deal with Kaido that anyone who survives the execution for more than an hour would be allowed to walk free. On the day of the execution, Odin lifted a plank on his shoulders and ordered his retainers to stand on top of the plank, proceeding to hold them all up out of harm's way. Although he survived more than an hour, he was still executed, but not before throwing his retainers away to safety. His son, Momonosuke, and retainer, Kinemon, are then sent to the future by Odin's wife's devil fruit abilities while she dies from getting shot. Around the same time on Zou, Nekomamushi and Inuarashi started their fight with each other, which lasted the next couple of decades. Somewhere in the Oikot Kingdom, after a violent conflict between the Marines and some pirates, Bellemare found two orphans named Nami and Nojiko in the rubble and decided to raise them as her daughters in Kokoyashi village in 1505. Boa Hancock and her sisters were captured as slaves for those celestial dragons around this time too. Also, this is the year when Monkey D. Dragon's son, Luffy, was born. 2 years later, in 1507, Queen Orihime of the Fishman Island began her campaign to get signatures for fishmen to coexist with humans on the surface. Meanwhile, on an undisclosed island, the world government sent a 13-year-old child named Rob Lucci to deal with the hostage situation there. In the end, Lucci killed both the hostages and the pirates, which led to him becoming a member of CP9. 3 years after the Boa sisters were first made slaves, in 1508, Fisher Tiger, who had previously suffered the same fate, had now broken out of Mary Joa. After returning to Fishman Island, he asked for King Neptune's permission and went back to free the rest of the slaves. After painfully climbing the Red Line, Fisher Tiger managed to break in and free all of the slaves, including the Boa sisters and Koala. Tiger then formed the Sun Pirates with the freed fishmen. Meanwhile, in the town of Flevens, due to the White Plague, the people of the entire area were exterminated except for a child named Trafalgar Law. Since he lost everything and everyone he ever loved, Law escaped the country and eventually joined Doflamingo's pirate crew. In 1510, the Revolutionary Army leader of the Eastern Forces, Ginny, was captured and experimented on by Saturn. Then the following year, while transporting the Hitohito no Mi model Nika, CP9 member 𝐿𝐴 got attacked by the Red Hair Pirates who managed to steal the Devil Fruit. At the same time, the former Empress of the Amazon Lily dies from love sickness and Boa Hancock takes her place. In order to protect her people, Hancock also became one of the 7 warlords of the sea. In the meantime, Law's condition worsens, and Rocinante realizes that the only way to save him is to steal the Ope Ope no Mi and have him eat it. Rocinante manages to steal the fruit on the Minion Island and force feed it to Law, successfully healing the boy. Unfortunately, Doflamingo got wind of Rocinante's betrayal and promptly executed his own brother for stealing a devil fruit he wanted for himself. Meanwhile, during an expedition in the South Blue, Sanji gets expelled from Germa 66 for trying to escape and winds up on a nearby cruise ship called the Orbit. Then in 1511, the revolutionary Ginny was affected by a deadly disease while being experimented on by Saturn. She was also forced to marry a celestial dragon while there, which resulted in her giving birth to a daughter who also had the same disease. However, due to her disease, both she and her daughter were thrown out of 𝐵𝐸𝐿𝐻, inadvertently setting them free. Barely alive, Ginny manages to reach Sorbet Kingdom and leaves her newborn in front of Kuma's church before dying. Kuma later finds the newborn child and decides to adopt her, naming her Jewelry Bonnie. While all of that was happening, a 7-year-old boy from Fuchsia Village winds up eating the Nika fruit red-haired pirates had with them when they arrived on the island. Later, the same day, Shanks sacrificed his left arm to save that boy's life from the sea beast and gave him his prized straw hat that was passed down to him by Goldie Roger. That little boy's name was Monkey D. Luffy, and he was a grandson of the legendary Marine Garp. Also, due to Garp's accepting to take care of Ace per Roger's request, the two boys lived together. Ace and Luffy became good friends over time and also befriended another boy from the kingdom named Sabo, who was a noble. After a few months, a celestial dragon came to visit the Joa kingdom for inspection. To make the kingdom seem more clean and secure, the nobles decided to burn the slums of the kingdom with all of the inhabitants still inside. Luckily, the revolutionary army swooped in to save as many people as they could from the fire. Since Sabo was disgusted by the actions of his family, he decided to leave the island on his own and set sail to become a pirate. Unfortunately for him, immediately after departing, he encountered the celestial dragon ship and was instantly attacked. Although it looked like Sabo died, he was later saved by Monkey D. Dragon himself. Having lost all of his memories, the boy decided to join the revolutionary army. Around the same time, Shanks visits Rayleigh at Sabaody and tells him about Monkey D. Luffy and how he reminds him of their old captain. On Full Shout Island, Fisher Tiger was killed after an ambush when he was trying to return the child slave Koala back to her parents. One of the Tiger's top officers, Arlong, was also captured by Admiral Borsalino and sent to Impel Down. Following Arlong's capture the next year, the new captain of the Sun Pirates, Jinbei, decided to become a warlord of the sea. He's done this in order to negotiate pardon and release for all of his old crewmates. The plan worked, but the Sun Pirates then promptly split into 3 different factions after Jinbei and Arlong disagreed over their goals as a pirate crew. On the Grand Line, Zeph and his cook pirates were successfully raiding Orbit, a ship Sanji was on, before its tsunami hit. The only survivors were Zeph and Sanji, and they ended up on a remote island with only 85 days worth of food. 3 months later, they were finally rescued and the two decided to open up Baratie, a sea-sailing restaurant. In Shimotsuki village, a boy named Yoronoa Zoro was training to become a swordsman along with his friend, a girl named Kuina. Over time, Zoro and Kuina developed a rival-like bond and they promised each other that one of them would become the world's greatest swordsman in the future. However, one day, Kuina tragically passed away, leaving Zoro to fulfill their shared dream in her memory. He also acquired a legendary sword, Wado Ichimonji, from her father. In 1514, Doflamingo successfully captured ships bound for 𝐵𝐸𝐿𝐻 that were loaded with tribute from various kingdoms and villages. He then blackmailed the celestial dragons into becoming a warlord of the sea. At the same time, Arlong and his new crew started terrorizing the East Blue and invaded Kokoyashi village. He killed Bellemare and forced Nami to be his cartographer, which made her a member of the Arlong pirates. He also made a deal with her that if she could bring him 100 million berry, he would leave Kokoyashi village. On Water 7, Tom had finished building the sea train and rails. However, Spondum, a member of CP5, framed him for attacking the Water 7 with his ships, which led to Tom being sent to Enies Lobby on his own train. Cutty Flam tried to stop the train with his own body, but failed and got badly injured. On Fishman Island, Queen Orihime got assassinated by Hody Jones, a fishman who hated humans and didn't want the Queen's campaign for peace to come true. He also blamed the assassination attempt on a human pirate, which further destroyed the relationship between the two races. The Nox pirates under Pecos arrived on Whole Cake Island and decided to stay there and become a part of Big Mom's crew. In 1516, Dr. Hiraluk found a reindeer-human hybrid on Drum Island and decided to raise him as his own son, naming him Tony Chopper. Reverie was also held this year, which was pretty much a council consisting of 50 world leaders. Their main talking point this year was the rise of the Revolutionary Army and Monkey D. Dragon. The following year, in a desperate attempt to find a cure for his daughter's illness, Kuma tries to find a doctor to treat Bonnie but gets told she only has a few more years to live. In Water 7, CP9 members Lucci, Kaku, Bluno, and Khalifa infiltrate the Galila company in order to get closer to the shipwrights and possibly get their hands on Pluton's blueprints. Meanwhile, on Thriller Bark, Moria's men capture a talking skeleton. Moria then steals Brook's shadow and transfers it to Ryoma's corpse. Somehow, a shadowless Brook managed to escape Thriller Bark back to his own ship. In 1518, Kuma was busy overthrowing the tyrannical government of the Sorbet Kingdom. After single-handedly stopping the king's forces, Kuma was named the new king of Sorbet. At Water 7, 𝗕𝐲𝐿 returns to the island after reconstructing his own body and gets entrusted with the blueprints to Pluton by his friend Iceberg. Iceberg also makes him change his name to Frankie. Around the same time in Arabasta, Nico Robin finds herself working for a warlord of the sea, Sir Crocodile. In the same year, Shanks was named an Emperor of the Sea. The next year, an infamous captain of the East Blue's Black Cat Pirates, Kuro, fakes his own death and becomes a butler for a sickly girl named Kaya. On Dawn Island, Ace decided to leave Luffy behind and become a pirate when he turned 17. Meanwhile, during an attempt at stealing Big Mom's poneglyph, the Nox pirates get captured. Zeppo loses his life, while Pedro loses his eye and 50 years of his lifespan. Another year later, the princess and heir of the Alabasta Kingdom, Vivi, along with her butler Ingram, joined Baroque Works to spy on Crocodile. Ready to make a name for himself, Ace formed his own crew called the Spade Pirates with his friend Masked Deuce. In the following months, Ace visits Wano with his crew and tries to help out the inhabitants of Amigasa Village while Kaido is away. He also finds and befriends Kaido's son, Yamato. Unable to do anything about the situation in his current state, Ace decides to leave Wano behind and goes on to defeat a warlord of the sea named Hanafuda. Shortly after this, Ace planned on finding and killing Whitebeard, but he ended up fighting Jinbei instead. After 5 full days, the battle was over and Whitebeard arrived in basically 4 days to join his crew. Ace was against this at first and tried assassinating Whitebeard over 100 times, but as time went on, he accepted his new crew and became the 2nd Division's commander. Kuma and Bonnie visit Dr. Vegapunk and ask him to help them cure the child's disease. Vegapunk only agrees on the condition that Kuma would allow him to clone his body and turn him into a cyborg for the world government. Saturn overhears the conversation and sends Admiral Kizaru to Vegapunk's location. Then Saturn relays to Kuma that in order to treat Bonnie, he must become a warlord of the sea and have his personality and free will completely erased. Agreeing to these terms, Kuma and Bonnie begin living with Vegapunk and form a bond with Kizaru, Vegapunk, and Sentomaru over the next 6 months. After getting better, Bonnie was sent back to the Sorbet Kingdom accompanied by a CP8 agent. Kuma was then sent to the East Blue on a mission for the world government. One of the Whitebeard pirates' officers, Thatch, finds that Yami Yami no Mi, one of the strongest devil fruits in the world. However, before he was able to do anything with it, he gets murdered by another member of the Whitebeard pirates, Marshall D. Teach, who wanted the fruit for himself. Teach then defects from the Whitebeard pirates and creates a crew of his own called the Blackbeard pirates. After Thatch's death, Ace took it upon himself to find and bring Teach back to Whitebeard so an appropriate punishment could be dealt. The following year, Bonnie, who was now fully cured, made her escape and set sail with a crew of fishermen after defeating the CP8 agent who was tasked with keeping her imprisoned. In February of the year 1522, Luffy officially sets sail and finally leaves Fuchsia Village behind. Anyways, Luffy quickly meets his first enemy, the pirate Alvida. She's pretty weak, so Luffy easily defeats and frees her prisoner, Kobe. Then he visits Shellstown on a nearby island to drop Kobe off and help him enlist in the Marines. While there, he also finds Roronoa Zoro tied up to a pole by Axe-Hand Morgan. After giving the swordsman his blades back, the duo defeat Axe-Hand Morgan and travel together to Orangetown. There they meet Nami, and together they liberate the town from the Buggy Pirates' oppression and secure a map of the Grand Line. On February 11th, the crew arrives at Syrup Village where Luffy befriends a local named Usopp. They quickly realize that Usopp's friend Kaya will soon get killed by Captain Kuro in an attempt to steal her fortune. The very next day, the crew deals with Kuro and saves her. Thankful for their help, Kaya gives the crew a ship called the 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿, and Usopp joins Luffy and the others on their journey. Later that same day, they rescue a couple of stranded bounty hunters named Johnny and Yosuke. A couple of days later, around February 14th, the crew winds up on the floating island restaurant Baratie after Luffy crash-landed onto it while deflecting a cannonball. He's then forced by Zeph to clean dishes for the next couple of days in order to pay for damages. In the meantime, Krieg pirates arrive on Baratie in order to take over it since their ship was destroyed. Dracul Mihawk, one of the 7 warlords of the sea and the world's strongest swordsman, arrives just after them. Seeing his chance, Zoro immediately challenges him to a duel, but gets fatally wounded. Mihawk leaves while Luffy and Sanji fight against Don Krieg's crew and win. Meanwhile, Nami steals the 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿 and uses it to sail back to her village. Before going after Nami, Luffy convinces Sanji to join his crew, which the chef accepts in order to achieve his dream of finding the All Blue, the mythical place where all 4 seas meet. Determined to get their navigator back, the remaining members of the Straw Hat crew reached Kokoyashi Village in the next day and found out that Nami was working for the fisherman Arlong all along. After learning the entire story from Nami's sister, they fight the Arlong pirates and liberate the village from their tyranny. Moved by Luffy's resolve to help his friends, Nami officially joins the crew's lineup. Due to all his recent victories, Luffy receives a bounty of 30 million berries. While this was happening, a civil war was brewing in Alabasta and around 300,000 soldiers joined the rebellion. Eventually, the crew reaches Loguetown. Luffy winds up evading Captain Smoker thanks to his dad, Dragon, and finally sets sail for the Grand Line with the rest of his crewmates. After failing to find Blackbeard on Drum Island, Ace left a message for Luffy with the locals before heading off for Alabasta. In the meantime, Bunny is still searching for Kuma and arrives on the island where he's located. However, concerned about a deal he made with Saturn, Kuma is afraid to meet her as it might put her in danger. Therefore, he teleports away. Back to the Straw Hats, the crew's last stop before the Grand Line is crossing the Reverse Mountain. After managing to do that, they come across Crocus and Laboon at the Twin Peaks. Laboon is desperately trying to break the Red Line by constantly hitting his head against it. Luffy eventually manages to calm the whale down and receives a log pose from Crocus as a thank you. Log pose is a device similar to a compass that pirates use to navigate the Grand Line. Anyway, the crew also meets and defeats Baroque Works against Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine, who beg Luffy to drop the duo off at Whiskey Peak. By the way, Miss Wednesday is actually Vivi, the princess of Alabasta Kingdom undercover. Upon their arrival at Whiskey Peak, the Straw Hats get invited to a feast, but unbeknownst to them, the entire island is a trap for unsuspecting pirates. Zoro spends the night fighting all 100 of Baroque Works agents and even gets into a minor scuffle with his captain due to a misunderstanding. Eventually, Mr. Five and Miss Valentine, two of Baroque Works officers, arrive on the island to abduct Miss Wednesday after learning that she's actually a princess, but the Straw Hats end up saving her. At her request, they set sail for Alabasta to stop the civil war from escalating. However, before that, they get interrupted by Miss All Sunday and learn that the Warlord of the Sea, Sir Crocodile, is behind the rebellion in Alabasta. Miss All Sunday is actually Nico Robin, the only survivor of the Ohara massacre. The crew then arrive at Little Garden. There they meet the captains of the giant warrior pirates, Dory and Brogy, who are still engaged in their legendary duel. Despite some trickery from Mr. 3, who was sent to the island by Crocodile, the crew managed to make peace between the two giants and continue their journey to Alabasta. However, it soon revealed that Nami fell prey to an ancient disease which forced the crew to make a pit stop on Drum Island in order to find a doctor. There they met a 140-year-old grandma and her talking reindeer who offered to treat Nami for them. After befriending the reindeer Chopper, they help him liberate the citizens of Drum Island by defeating its monarch, Wepple. After sending Wepple flying away, Luffy and the crew set sail for Alabasta once again, but now with a doctor on board. On March 2nd, the crew finally reaches the shores of Alabasta. There, Luffy reunites with his brother Ace, who helps him deal with Captain Smoker. Ace gives Luffy his Weaver card so that they can find each other more easily in the future before leaving to continue his search for Teach. After this encounter, Luffy and some of his crewmates head to confront Crocodile. Unfortunately, they soon get trapped in Crocodile's casino and almost die, but Sanji manages to save them in time. After escaping, Luffy engages Crocodile in a battle but can't do any damage to him due to Crocodile being a Logia user. Luffy is then impaled by the Warlord and left to die. However, unexpectedly, he gets saved by Robin. After learning Crocodile's weakness to water, Luffy attempts to get his revenge, but loses once again. Ultimately, the Straw Hats are too late to stop the rebellion from starting, and chaos breaks in Alabasta's capital. Each member of the Straw Hat crews engages a high-ranking Baroque Works officer in battle. After some fierce battles, the Straw Hats are victorious. Meanwhile, Crocodile and Robin find a poneglyph hidden in Alabasta's crypts. Crocodile believed that this poneglyph would give him information on where to find the ancient weapon, Pluton, but it turned out to be a dead end. Angered by this, Crocodile impales Robin as he has no use for her anymore. It's around this time that Luffy arrives and attacks Crocodile yet again. Using his own blood instead of water, Luffy successfully negates Crocodile's powers and finally defeats the Warlord. Exhausted from his fight, Luffy spends the next 3 days asleep and 1 day partying after that. Luffy and Zoro soon get new bounties and the crew leaves Alabasta. In the meantime, on Whitebeard's ship, Rockstar, a member of the Red Hair Pirates, delivers a letter from Shanks requesting Whitebeard to meet in person. Now that Crocodile is behind bars, a summit is held on Marijoa to discuss the Warlord's replacement. This meeting is then briefly interrupted by one of Blackbeard's men, Lafitte, who recommends his captain for the role. On the Going Merry, the crew notices that Nico Robin has boarded their ship. After some interrogation, Luffy lets Robin join the crew. The very next day, on March 9th, the crew makes it to Jaya. There they meet Mont Blanc Cricket, a distant relative of Mont Blanc Noland. As it turns out, Cricket lived on Jaya for the past 10 years in order to find the legendary city of gold Noland talked about. On Jaya, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami meet Blackbeard, unaware of who he is at the time, and listen to his speech about people's dreams. They also beat up a pirate named Bellamy who stole some gold from Cricket. Eventually, the crew realizes that the city of gold was most likely thrown to the sky by Knock Upstream instead of sinking underwater as Cricket originally thought. On March 10th, with the help of Cricket and his sons, the crew rides the knockup stream and reaches 𝐿𝐵𝐴. There, they soon get separated by 𝐿, self-proclaimed god of 𝐿𝐵𝐴. After regrouping, the crew defeats all of 𝐿's officers, but failed to defeat 𝐿 himself due to his powerful Thunder Logia Devil Fruit. Luckily for them, Luffy's body is made out of rubber, meaning electricity has no effect on him. Luffy delivers the final blow to 𝐿 and rings the golden bell of Shendora. With the bell finally ringing, the 1,000-year Sky War finally comes to an end. During the commotion, 𝐿 winds up using his ship, 𝗕𝐴𝐼𝐼𝐼, to reach the moon, which was his goal all along. The next day, on March 11th, Robin finds a poneglyph on 𝐿𝐵𝐴 and informs Luffy about what it says, including Roger's message. After being gifted some gold by the Sky People, the crew falls down to the Blue Sea. Immediately after, they have a minor stint with a scummy pirate named Foxy on Long Ring Long Land. Essentially, they're tricked into playing the Devi Back Fight, which is a pirate game where one crew can take another crew's crewmates. With some trouble, the Straw Hats manage to win and prepare to leave the island. However, before they can do that, they're ambushed by Admiral 𝐿�KIJI. Easily overpowered, the crew receives a warning from the Admiral about Robin. In the end, they're allowed to escape as 𝐿�KIJI appreciates what they did to Crocodile. After taking 4 full days to recover from their battle against 𝐿�KIJI, the crew leaves the island on March 16th. They soon spot a sea train heading to Water 7 and decide to stop there to make repairs to the Going Merry. They exchange their gold for berries and go to 𝐿𝐵𝐴 Company. There they get told that the Going Merry has no chance of being repaired due to its immense damage. In the meantime, Usopp loses around half of the money the crew had to members of the Frankie family and also gets a pretty good beating. After seeing Usopp bruised so badly, the crew takes their revenge against the Frankie family and completely destroys their hideout. Backed into a corner, Luffy makes the decision to have a new ship made instead of trying to repair Merry. Angered by this, as Merry was a gift from Kaya, Usopp decides to challenge Luffy over it. Burdened by grief and responsibility, Luffy beats down Usopp for questioning his authority and gives him the Merry anyway. In the midst of all of this, Robin winds up missing all of a sudden. Things become even worse when the crew eventually uncovers a conspiracy to murder the 𝐿𝐵𝐴 president, Iceberg. During that time, Usopp forms a budding relationship with Frankie while trying to fix Merry on his own. Finding out through the news that Robin may be a part of this assassination plot, Luffy pays Iceberg a visit. He soon realizes that some of the shipwrights working for 𝐿𝐵𝐴 are actually CP9 agents in disguise who are looking for blueprints of the ancient weapon Pluton. After losing a fight to Rob Lucci, Luffy and the crew fail to retrieve Robin from them. Also, CP9 agents figure out that Frankie is actually 𝗕𝐿𝐴, and that he most likely has the blueprints that they're looking for. After paying him a visit, they kidnap both him and Usopp and take them with them to Enies Lobby via sea train. Thankfully, Sanji manages to sneak onto the train and beat down most of the Cypher Pole agents before freeing Frankie and Usopp. Meanwhile, on Water 7, the crew learns that there's actually another sea train called Rocket Man, and using it, the rest of the crew and Frankie's family rush to Enies Lobby to save their friends. Seeing the crew's resolve, Frankie decides to help the Straw Hats save Robin. On March 20th, the Straw Hat crew and Frankie family storm Enies Lobby and wipe out most of the Marines there. They soon get confronted by CP9 agents, and the crew splits up in order to take them down. In the meantime, the chief of CP9, Spandam, accidentally activates the Buster Call. Just before the island is completely destroyed, the Straw Hats win their battle against CP9 and rescue Frankie and Robin. Then, Going Merry, with no one piloting it, comes to save them and brings the crew back to Water 7. With this being its final voyage, the Merry is given a proper funeral to commemorate her services to the crew. Meanwhile, somewhere in the New World, Kuma pays Vegapunk a visit and witnesses the pacifistas being developed. The duo then discuss the Straw Hats' victory at Enies Lobby. A couple of days later, on March 22nd, Vegapunk also finishes work on his Seraphim project and creates S-Shark, S-Snake, S-Bear, and S-Hawk. Back at Water 7, Garp pays a visit to his grandson. Shanks and Whitebeard also meet. Shanks asks Whitebeard to call off Ace as searching for Blackbeard is dangerous. However, Whitebeard refuses and the two emperors briefly clash. Meanwhile, on Banara Island, Ace finally catches up to Blackbeard. The two engage in an epic duel, but in the end, Blackbeard is victorious. He then hands Ace over to the Marines in exchange for the Warlord title. A couple of days later, on March 25th, each member of the crew receives official bounties from the world government. Frankie unveils his greatest creation yet, a new ship for the Straw Hat crew, the Thousand Sunny. After some interesting persuasive tactics from Robin, Frankie winds up joining the Straw Hat Pirates as a shipwright. He soon shows off what the ship is capable of by using Ku the Burst to escape from Garp. Later the same day, after leaving Water 7 in a hurry, the crew find themselves lost in the Florian Triangle. There, they meet Brook and Luffy asks him to join the crew. The Straw Hats then wind up on Thriller Bark, Gecko Maria's ship. They soon get their shadows stolen by Maria and are forced to stay on the ship until they retrieve them. After defeating the resurrected Ryuma, Zoro earns his legendary blade, Shusui. Then the entire crew is forced to battle against a legendary giant, Ors, who Maria has resurrected. With some teamwork, they manage to defeat the giant and Luffy punches all of the shadows out of Maria. After the battle the next day, Kuma is sent to the island to wipe out the Straw Hats, but he decides to spare them after Zoro sacrifices himself by taking in all of the pain Luffy accumulated over the battle. After partying for a couple of days, the crew leaves Thriller Bark on March 29th. In April, the crew arrives near the Red Line. They save the mermaid Cammy and Hatchman from the Mako pirates. Together, they all visited 𝐂𝐫𝐴 archipelago where the Straw Hat crew had their ship coated so they can go underwater. The one coating their ship turns out to be Silver's Rayleigh, the former right-hand man of the Pirate King, which leads to some interesting interactions. With some free time on their hands, the crew explores the island. Cammy gets kidnapped again and Luffy finds her in an auction house that sells humans and fishmen. He also winds up meeting some of the other super rookies of his generation, notably Eustace Kid and Trafalgar Law. Disgusted by St. Charles' attitude towards Hatchin and his race, Luffy punches the Celestial Dragon and sparks a major incident. Immediately, Kizaru, Pacifistas, and Sentomaru are dispatched to 𝐂𝐵𝐷 to bring in the Straw Hats. Thankfully, Rayleigh appears and manages to hold off Kizaru, while Kuma also arrives and teleports Straw Hats away to different parts of the world. He did this to secretly help them, because the islands each member was sent to were specifically chosen by Kuma in order to make the Straw Hats stronger. Like Zoro getting sent to Koraigana Island to train under Mihawk, Nami being teleported to Weatheria since weather is her thing, and Robin being sent to meet the Revolutionary Army for obvious reasons. It's also during that time that news of Ace's execution began to circulate. A couple of days later, after helping the Straw Hats escape, Kuma willingly gives up the last bit of his free will, but asks Vegapunk to program his body to defend the Thousand Sunny until one of the Straw Hats comes back. Vegapunk honors his friend's wishes and does exactly that. Meanwhile, after getting teleported, Luffy finds himself on Amazon Lily, an island where only women are allowed. He also gets poisoned by eating some random mushrooms. After getting treatment, Luffy goes through a series of trials to win the respect of the tribe's female warriors. Before long, the empress of the tribe, Boa Hancock, falls head over heels for him. However, the fun times don't last forever, as Luffy soon finds out that Ace was captured and is about to be executed. The world government was also aware that Whitebeard was bound to attack Marineford in order to save him, which meant that a huge war was about to happen. A few days later, around April 10th, Luffy leaves with Boa to infiltrate Impel Down, a prison where Ace is kept. 4 days later, they finally reach the prison and using her title of Warlord, Boa smuggles Luffy inside. He soon reaches the lower levels where he finds some familiar faces like Buggy, Mr. 3, and Mr. 2. Eventually, with their help, Luffy goes all the way down to level 4 before facing off against the Warden, Magellan. This was an enemy Luffy definitely wasn't prepared for, and he soon got infected with deadly poison. However, his life was saved by Mr. 2, who took him to Ivankov in level 5.5. Almost a full day later, after a brutal treatment, the Straw Hat Captain recovers from his injuries and grows immune to Magellan's poison in the process. Meanwhile, while all this was happening in the prison, Kaido and his crew were making their way to Marineford because they wanted to participate in the war. However, somewhere along the way, they were intercepted by the Red Hair Pirates who engaged them in battle. Now fully healed, Luffy managed to reach Ace's cell, but only found Jinbei inside. He soon got informed that Ace was already in the process of being transferred to Marineford for his execution. At the same time, Blackbeard also breaks into Impel Down. He engages in a short battle against Luffy, but ultimately proceeds deeper into the prison. He eventually ends up freeing and recruiting some of the strongest level 6 prisoners and brings them aboard his ship. Working with other inmates, Luffy manages to leave the prison and heads to Marineford. Around 3 p.m., Whitebeard's forces arrive on the island to save Ace, officially starting the war. Soon after, Luffy arrives as well, and working together with Whitebeard and his crew, he desperately tries to save his brother. However, even with an entire armada, Whitebeard's forces start dwindling down at a rapid rate. Although Luffy managed to save his brother for a brief moment, they're soon intercepted by Akainu and Ace loses his life. Whitebeard also meets his end at the hands of Akainu and Blackbeard. During the commotion, following orders from the top, Doflamingo makes an attempt on Moria's life, but fails to eliminate his fellow warlord. In complete shock at what has just transpired, Jinbei manages to save Luffy's life and bring him onto Law's ship to have his wounds treated. Soon after, Shanks finally arrives at the battlefield and manages to stop the war with his influence. A couple of weeks later, Luffy finally awakens on Amazon Lily. Broken by his brother's death, Luffy spends the next few days on Amazon Lily trying to recover. After some time, Jinbei convinces him to get back on his feet and Rayleigh decides to teach the young man how to use Haki over the course of the next 2 years. Before beginning his lessons, however, Luffy goes back to Marineford and rings the commemorative Ox Bell 16 times, leaving a secret message for his crewmates. Meanwhile, on Katakuri Island, while studying Vegapunk's creation, Frankie winds up accidentally destroying Vegapunk's childhood lab. Around the same time, Sengoku decides to step down from the position of Fleet Admiral, leaving the seat vacant for the time being. Garp also decided to step down from active duty and focus more on training new recruits. Surprisingly, Buggy gets an invitation from the world government to become a warlord of the sea because they mistook him for a strong pirate. After reading about Ace's death in the news, Sabo suddenly regains his memories and starts searching for 𝐵𝐻𝐵𝐻 no Mi. Soon after, Kuma arrives on Sabaody to fulfill his final order, to protect the Thousand Sunny until one of the Straw Hats returns. At the same time, Jewelry Bonnie gets captured by Blackbeard and sold off to the world government. However, at some point she manages to escape. Since the Fleet Admiral's seat was vacant, Admirals 𝐂𝐾HI and 𝐂𝐈𝐒 agreed to duel each other for the position. This duel happened on 𝗏𝐻𝐻𝐿 and it was so intense that it completely changed the climate of the entire island. Following his loss, 𝐂𝐾HI resigned and left the Marines altogether while 𝐂𝐈𝐒 assumed Sengoku's place as Fleet Admiral. The Marines then transferred their base of operations to the New World and enlisted 2 new admirals, Fujitora and Green Bull. SWORD is also formed around this time. It's weird to explain, but basically SWORD is a group of Marines who can do pretty much whatever they want without having to listen to orders from the world government. But they also aren't recognized as actual Marines, so if they make a mess, they won't get help from the Navy since it's not their problem. With their captain dead, the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates did their best to exact revenge on Blackbeard, but ultimately failed and gave up the pursuit entirely. Following this battle, Blackbeard acquired most of Whitebeard's former territories and islands. He then made it his goal to hunt down and steal the most powerful devil fruits in the world. Due to his actions, Blackbeard is eventually granted the title of Emperor. It's around this time that former Admiral 𝐂𝐻𝐿 meets Blackbeard's crew on a certain island. After a brief clash, Blackbeard convinces 𝐂𝐻𝐿 to join them. This leads to 𝗂𝐻𝐿 becoming the 10th Titanic captain. Meanwhile, Fishman Island, one of Whitebeard's former territories, is left unprotected. Big Mom seizes the opportunity and puts the island under her banner. Somewhere in the New World, Eustace Kid is foolish enough to challenge the Red Hair Pirates and lose his arm as a result. After treating Luffy, Trafalgar Law makes his way to the New World. In order to get the Warlord position, Law went to Hachinosu and stole the hearts of 100 pirates, bringing them to the Marine headquarters in exchange for a position. Taking advantage of the chaos on Hachinosu, Blackbeard invades the island and conquers it. Kobe was also present on the island at the time and helped save many civilians. This eventually became known as the Rockyport Incident, and Kobe earned the title the Hero of Rockyport. While all of this was happening, Edward Weevil, a guy who claims to be Whitebeard's biological son, gets the title of a warlord. He then starts hunting down Whitebeard's former members in search of his treasure. In the same year, Sword Captain and Supernova X Drake joins the Beast Pirates in order to infiltrate and spy on them for the Marines. Other Supernovas like 𝐵𝐻𝐵𝐻𝐿 and 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 Appo take their shot at Big Mom, but each one failed miserably. After his defeat, 𝐵𝐻𝐿 decides to join Big Mom's crew and marry one of her daughters. However, in his secret, his plan was actually to try and assassinate Big Mom when the opportunity presented itself. Meanwhile, CP9 agents train to become stronger and eventually integrate within CP0. Almost 2 years after Luffy's training began, around January of 1524, Kinemon, Momonosuke, and some of the Scabbards suddenly appear in Wano thanks to Toki's devil fruit powers. There, they witness the horrors of Wano after 20 years of the Beast Pirates' occupation. Together they leave the country in order to recruit allies from Zou to attempt to take the country back. During their journey, some of the Scabbards end up on Dressrosa, while Kinemon and Momonosuke end up on 𝗏𝐻𝐿. There, Kinemon is defeated by Law, while Momonosuke winds up eating Vegapunk's failed copy of Kaido's devil fruit. It's also in January of this year that Uroge and his crew tried to invade Totoland. During the battle, Uroge actually managed to defeat one of the Sweet Commanders, Snack, but ultimately got defeated by Cracker and was forced to retreat. Meanwhile, on Sabaody, a certain crew decides to take advantage of the Straw Hats' disappearance and pretend to be them. They did this in order to recruit strong pirates using the Straw Hats' reputation. A couple of days later, around January 27th, Frankie is the first Straw Hat to arrive on Sabaody. There, he sees badly injured Kuma, who has successfully protected their ship for the past 2 years. Having completed his final mission, Kuma leaves. He's eventually caught by celestial dragons and made a slave for helping the Straw Hats escape 2 years prior. During the following week, all Straw Hats reunite on Sabaody, and around February 5th, they make their way to Fishman Island. Upon reaching Fishman Island, the Straw Hats find themselves in the middle of a coup organized by Hody Jones. Luffy befriends the mermaid princess Shirahoshi and eventually gains King Neptune's trust. He then shows just how much he's grown over the past 2 years by using his Conqueror's Haki to instantly down 50,000 fishmen. Other Straw Hats show their strength as well, and they easily take down Hody and his entire army, successfully saving the Fishman Island. During the battle, Luffy lost a lot of blood, but Jinbei offered to give some of his own blood to Luffy. This is especially important since the transfer of blood between humans and fishmen is something that's been forbidden for a long time. Afterwards, Jinbei also promises to join the crew when the time is right. After all of this, Luffy somehow gets on the phone with Big Mom and directly challenges her by claiming that Fishman Island is his territory now. With that business concluded, around February 6th, the Straw Hats officially entered the New World. Immediately upon entering, they arrive at 𝗏𝐻𝐿 where they encountered Trafalgar Law. Luffy and Law form an alliance to defeat one of the 4 emperors, Kaido. However, before they can take him on, Law explains that they need to defeat Doflamingo first, who's an important player in Kaido's organization. Before they can attack Doflamingo though, they need to kidnap Caesar Clown, who's an important asset of Doflamingo. Luffy obviously doesn't understand any of this, but agrees to make an alliance anyway because he trusts Law. With Law's help, the Straw Hats infiltrate 𝗏𝐻𝐻𝐿, fight off a dragon, the Yeti brothers, the Brownbeard pirates, save imprisoned children, kidnap Caesar, and even defeat two of 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜's officers, Virgo and Monet. In the middle of this, they also meet Kinemon and Momonosuke and decide to travel together to Dressrosa in order to defeat 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜. In the meantime, after hearing about what happened on 𝗏𝐻𝐻𝐿, enraged 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜 rushes towards the island. However, by the time he arrives, the Straw Hats and their allies are already long gone. He then picks a fight with Smoker and almost kills him, but is eventually forced to back down once Aokiji arrives. Meanwhile, somewhere in the New World, an alliance was formed between Kid, Apu, and Hawkins, with the goal to bring down Red Hair Shanks. On Zou, one of Kaido's subordinates, Jack, is trying to track Raizo, one of Oden's scabbards. Jack ends up poisoning Minks and even torturing Nekomamushi and Inuarashi, but in the end gets no information about Raizo's whereabouts. At the same time on Dressrosa, 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜 steps down from his warlord position in order to make the Straw Hats and Law drop their guard. In reality, this was all orchestrated in advance and he never really planned on giving up the title. Sensing the danger, Law makes the crew wear disguises and hide their identities using Kinemon's powers. At this point, each of the Straw Hats go on their own little adventures to achieve certain objectives. Luffy fights in the Colosseum tournament to win Ace's Devil Fruit, but meets Sabo there and lets him take it instead. Robin and Usopp find the Tontatas and help them with their plans. Sanji spends the day with Viola, Dressrosa's princess, while Zoro runs around all over the place looking for the Tontata thief who stole his sword. While all that is happening, Law faces off against 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜 to get his revenge for Rocinante's death, but ends up losing. At one point, the crew gets tailed by one of Big Mom's ships because Caesar owes the Emperor a large sum of money. It's here that the crew splits up to take Caesar away from Dressrosa, with only Luffy, Zoro, Robin, Frankie, and Usopp remaining on the island. Soon enough, Frankie locates the Smile Factory, frees the Tontata slaves working inside, and destroys the building. With this, 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜's operation begins to crumble, and as a last resort, he casts his ultimate technique, Birdcage, enveloping the entire island. Teaming up with all of the warriors from the Colosseum, the Straw Hats, Tontatas, and Law take down all of 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜's officers. Luffy starts battling the warlord himself, and after revealing his Gear 4 technique, he successfully defeats him. While the people on Dressrosa partied for a couple of days, around February 8th, the Kid Apu-Hawkins alliance was in a meeting. However, the meeting was suddenly interrupted by Kaido, who jumped from the Sky Island straight onto them. After a futile fight against the Emperor, they were taken prisoners and transported to Wano, except Apu, who was revealed to be working with Kaido all along. News of 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜's defeat soon reached Kaido, who orders Jack to retreat from Zou and try to rescue him. Around the same time, the other half of the Straw Hats, Sanji, Nami, Brook, and Chopper arrive on Zou and help cure Minks from the poison. Meanwhile, on Whole Cake Island, a tea party was being held where Judge Vinsmoke, Sanji's father, pitched the idea of having Sanji marry one of Big Mom's daughters to create an alliance between the Big Mom pirates and the Germa 66. The Straw Hats and Law finally leave the island while being chased by the Marines. Also, the Colosseum warriors they saved before all pledged their loyalty to Luffy, creating the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Later the same day, Jack tried to free 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐺𝑜 on Kaido's orders and foolishly attacked the Marine ship transporting him. Unbeknownst to him, the former warlord was being escorted by Fujitora, Sengoku, and Sudo, which meant that Jack got absolutely destroyed. Although he was heavily injured, he somehow made his way back to Zou. A couple of days later, on February 15th, 𝐵𝐾𝐲𝑚 and Bege arrive on Zou to seize Caesar and Sanji. They revealed to Sanji that he needs to marry Big Mom's daughter and blackmail him into coming with them, threatening to kill his mentor Zeph if he refuses. A few days later on Baltigo, the Blackbeard pirates launch an all-out attack on the Revolutionary Army's HQ. Although the revolutionaries managed to escape, the island was completely destroyed. Cypher Pole also invades the island, but Blackbeard's forces escape just in time. On the same day, the rest of the Straw Hats finally arrive on Zou and reunite with their crewmates. Luffy gets informed about what happened to Sanji and decides to go to get his friends back. The next day, Inuarashi and Nekomamushi decide to show the Straw Hats the road poneglyph hidden on Zou, one of the 4 they would need to find. Afterwards, the Ninja Mink Samurai Pirate Alliance is formed with the goal of taking down Kaido. In the meantime, Jack tries to kill Zunisha by injuring its leg, but after begging Momonosuke for permission, the elephant defends itself and destroys Jack's fleet in one fell swoop. After that, a group consisting of Luffy, Nami, Chopper, Brook, 𝐵𝐾𝐲𝑚, Pedro, and Carrot sail after Sanji and head for Whole Cake Island to bring him back, while the rest head towards Wano to make preparations for a fight against Kaido. A couple of days later, around February 25th, the part of the crew tasked with rescuing Sanji is closing in on Big Mom's territory. However, since Luffy ate all the food on the ship, they're starving and Luffy decides to eat raw armored stonefish. He gets badly poisoned because of this, but ends up being saved by Sanji's sister, Reiju, who was passing by. The next day, they successfully infiltrate Todo Land and meet Sanji's fiancé, Pudding, in Chocolate Town. Pudding pretends that she wants to help them rescue Sanji, but in truth, she's leading them into a trap on Whole Cake Island. Early the next morning, Luffy's group arrives on Whole Cake Island. There, Luffy engages in a battle against Charlotte Cracker, one of Big Mom's sweet commanders. The battle lasts the entire night, around 11 hours, but Luffy is eventually victorious. The crew then reunites with Sanji, but instead of going back with them, Sanji beats down Luffy and orders him to leave. In reality, Sanji did want to leave, but was too afraid of what may happen to Zeph if he did. After Sanji leaves, Luffy and Nami get attacked by the full might of Big Mom's crew and eventually get defeated and imprisoned. In the meantime, Brook infiltrates Big Mom's poneglyph room and secures a copy of her road poneglyph for the crew. Luffy and Nami are soon saved by Jinbei and meet 𝐵𝐵𝐴. 𝐵𝐵𝐴 reveals his real intentions to everyone and how he plans to assassinate Big Mom during her tea party. Luffy and 𝐵𝐵𝐴 agree to form a temporary alliance to defeat the Emperor. In the meantime, Sanji realizes Pudding's true intentions and decides to regroup with Luffy early the next day. At 10 AM, the tea party starts and a lot of influential people from the underworld come as Big Mom's guests. On surface, Sanji's and Pudding's weddings should make a strong bond between the two families. However, in reality, Big Mom plans to slaughter Sanji's entire family and forcefully take their technology. Before that can happen, however, Sanji and the Straw Hats manage to save them. 𝐵𝐴 executes a plan to kill Big Mom, but it fails and their escape route is cut off. By sheer luck, a certain box Big Mom took from Fishman Island explodes, creating a distraction that allows everyone to escape. However, just in case, Pedro stays behind to ensure that everyone can leave safely, sacrificing his own life in the process. Before they can leave, Luffy is intercepted by Katakuri, Big Mom's strongest officer, and they engage in a lengthy battle in Miro World. After a 12 hours long battle, early in the morning of March 1st, Luffy finally defeats Katakuri and escapes with his crew. In the process of escaping, Nami manages to steal one of Big Mom's weapons, Zeus, and bring it with her. The same day, Caesar Clown, together with Vinsmoke, escapes Todo Land as well. Afterwards, Caesar and Judge join hands in creating Neo-Mads. Aside from being a Vegapunk hate club, this group also served as a successor to their former research institute, Mads. Taking advantage of the chaos that just happened on the Whole Cake, Kuzan and Von Augur arrive on the island and kidnap Pudding due to her potential ability to read poneglyphs. After this incident, Luffy's named the 5th Emperor of the Sea in the news, and his bounty grows to 1.5 billion berries. Meanwhile, the Revolutionary Army frees the Kingdom of Lulusia and encourages them to stand up to their monarchs. The next day, on March 2nd, enraged by what just transpired on her territory, Big Mom informs Kaido that she'd be coming to Wano to take Luffy's head, whether he likes it or not. During the same day, rulers from all over the world start arriving to 𝐿 in preparation for the reverie that's planned to start tomorrow. Weirdly enough, Shanks also arrives in secret and gets a meeting with 5 elders. He informs them about a certain pirate, although we're not sure who he's referring to. In the meantime, the Revolutionary Army and Bonnie sneak into 𝐿. On March 3rd, the first day of reverie begins. Meanwhile, on Sphinx Island, Nekomamushi asks Whitebeard's former first mate Marco to aid them in their plan to bring down Kaido. At the same time, Luffy's group finally reaches Wano and regroups with the rest of the crew. Later the same day, Luffy foolishly challenges Kaido but gets easily defeated and thrown in prison. On March 4th, the second day of reverie begins, and soon news begins circulating about the possible abolishment of the warlord system. Also, the news that Gecko Maria is active again with his zombie army are reported. Then a day goes by with nothing significant happening. On March 6th, the warlord system is officially abolished, but the reverie is suddenly interrupted by an attack on the food reserve on 𝐿 by the Revolutionary Army. Sabo and the others manage to free Kuma and escape because the admirals aren't able to use the full scope of their abilities so as not to damage the Holy Land. In the midst of all this, Sabo and Walpole eavesdrop on a conversation between Alabasta's king and the Gorosei. They find out about the true ruler of the world, Imu, and Nefertari D. Lily. Deciding to intervene and save Cobra, Sabo tries to fight the elders but is soon overpowered and barely manages to escape with his own life. Walpole also escapes 𝐿 and takes Vivi with him, who's now being targeted by CP0's forces. Together they reach out to Big News Morgan and take refuge on his flying ship. Around March 7th, fake news begins to spread about Sabo being responsible for Cobra's murder. This fake news inspires 12 nations around the world to rise up and declare independence from the world government. 8 of them are successful and declare independence. People also start referring to Sabo as the Flame Emperor. The same day, Gecko Maria reaches the shores of Hachinosu with his zombie army and demands the release of one of his men, Absalom, but finds out that he was already killed by Blackbeard. After refusing to join Blackbeard's crew, the former warlord is then defeated and imprisoned in Hachinosu. Following Maria's imprisonment, Blackbeard sets sail for Amazon Lily to steal Boa Hancock's fruit. Meanwhile on Wano, CP0 arrives to secure a weapons deal with the shogun Kurozumi Orochi during a banquet. The Straw Hats infiltrate the event and chaos ensues afterward. Big Mom also winds up reaching the shores of Wano, but her boat gets intercepted by King, which causes the Emperor to fall down into the waters below and lose all of her memories. The next day, on March 8th, Zoro had Shusui stolen by Gyukimaru and defeated Killer. At the same time, Big Mom washes ashore and becomes friends with Tama and Chopper. Law's crew is thrown in jail the same day in order to lure him out. The day after that, Shimotsuke Yasue is caught and publicly executed by Orochi. Upon her arrival at Udon, Big Mom regains her memories but soon gets captured by Queen and taken to Onigashima. There she ends up briefly clashing against Kaido. With Queen gone, Luffy and his allies take over Udon and free all of the prisoners without Kaido finding out. In the meantime, Law offers to turn himself in exchange for his crew being released. On March 10th, the reverie officially concludes and Sabo escapes to Lelougia while Bonnie makes her way towards Egghead to question Vegapunk about reversing Kuma's current state. It's around the same time that Imu expresses a desire to use Mother's Flame in order to activate one of the ancient weapons in the government's possession. He chose the island of Lelougia to be its target since Sabo was also nearby. Luffy spends the day training in Udon while Zoro receives a new sword called Enma in exchange for returning Shusui to Wano. The following day, X-Drake helps Law escape from prison so he can join Luffy in taking down Kaido. On March 12th, Kaido and Big Mom decide to stop fighting each other and form an alliance instead. X-Drake gets wind of this and relays the info to Marine HQ. At HQ, after learning about an alliance between Kaido and Big Mom, Sengoku tells his fellow Marine recruits about the God Valley incident and the Rocks Pirates. The same day, the world government starts deploying Seraphims for the first time in order to capture all the warlords who served under them. On Amazon Lily, the Marines start their invasion to arrest Hancock, but get intercepted by Blackbeard's forces. Thankfully, Rayleigh is also on the island and uses his influence to force both the government and Blackbeard to leave. Although he's forced to back off, Blackbeard decides to take 800 Marines as hostages to compensate for his losses. However, Kobe offers himself up instead and gets taken to Hachinasu. Most likely the same day, the Marines also attack Kariberry to arrest Buggy. Luckily for him, Crocodile reaches the island just in time to save him. He didn't save Buggy just out of the goodness of his heart though, because as it turned out, Buggy owed him a large sum of money. To repay his debt, Buggy offers Crocodile control over his entire organization, after which Crocodile calls Mihawk and asks him to join him since they're both being hunted down by the Marines anyway. This eventually led to the creation of the Cross Guild. On March 14th, the members of the Alliance meet in Onigashima Village in order to discuss their plans, and a day after, Luffy joins them. On March 16th, they finally depart for Onigashima. On March 17th, the raid on Onigashima finally begins while Wano is celebrating its fire festival. One of the scabbards, Kanjiro, is revealed to be a traitor, but his plan to stop the raid ultimately fails. Jinbei joins the Straw Hats, and together the Alliance storms Onigashima, starting a long battle that would end up lasting the entire night. After some setbacks, Luffy and his allies reach the rooftop where Kaido and Big Mom are waiting for them. Despite all of his growth, it's evident that Luffy is still no match for Kaido. However, just as he's about to die, he awakens his devil fruit and becomes the sun god Nika. After this ridiculous power-up, Luffy engages Kaido in their final legendary battle and defeats the Emperor, saving Wano from a 20-year-long occupation. Meanwhile, Kid and Law defeat Big Mom. Orochi is also killed during the battle and Momonosuke becomes the new shogun of Wano. Oh, and he also aged 20 years due to Shinobu's devil fruit. A few days later on March 24th, Luffy and Buggy are both officially named Emperors of the Sea. Luffy, Kid, and Law each receive a bounty of 3 billion berries. A giant festival is thrown in their honor, and in the middle of all that, Robin and Law find out that the ancient weapon Pluton is supposedly somewhere underneath Wano. The two also get a chance to read Wano's road poneglyph. Before the Straw Hats could leave, Admiral Green Bull arrived on Wano prepared to capture every pirate there. He took many members of the Beast Pirates into custody but couldn't reach Luffy's crew as he was stopped by Shanks' overwhelming display of haki. On March 25th, back on Zou, Carrot gets promoted to the new king of the Minks since Nekomamushi and Igarashi chose to stay on Wano by Momonosuke's side. Sometime later, the Marines reach Sphinx Island and arrest Edward Weevil with the help of Green Bull. On April 2nd, Luffy and his crew officially leave Wano, but not before putting the island under their protection. Around the same time, Imu finally activates the ancient weapon using Mother's Flame and completely eradicates Lelougia. On a boat near the island, Sabo narrowly escapes the beam with only a few other citizens. A week after they left Wano, around April 9th, the Straw Hat crew arrives on Egghead Island and meets Dr. Vegapunk. Members of CP0, Lucci, Kaku, and Stussy also arrive on the island on orders to assassinate Vegapunk. The Straw Hats and Bonnie try protecting all of the Vegapunks, but Shaka unfortunately gets shot and Pythagoras falls victim to a Seraphim. One of the Vegapunks, York, is revealed to be a traitor, but her plans are quickly foiled by the Straw Hats. Surprisingly, Stussy ends up betraying her fellow CP0 agents, revealing that she was loyal to Vegapunk all along. Meanwhile, on Winter Island, the Heart Pirates are ambushed by Blackbeard's crew, and after an intense battle are utterly destroyed. However, Law manages to survive thanks to Beppo. Simultaneously, near 𝐿𝐵𝐴th, Kid decides that it would be a good idea to attack the Red Hair Pirates again. Similar to the Heart Pirates, his crew gets absolutely destroyed with his status remaining unknown. Both Supernova crews lost their ships as well, and their poneglyphs rubbings were stolen by the two emperors. At the new Revolutionary Army base on 𝐵𝐫𝐴𝐻𝐾 Kingdom, Kuma seemingly starts acting on his own and rushes towards Egghead Island. Since the Red Line was in his way, he climbed it and entered 𝐿𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴. Shortly after Kuma's departure from the island, Sabo reunites with his fellow revolutionaries and discusses everything that he's seen, including Imu and the beam that took out 𝐿𝐿ugia. With Koby taken hostage on Hachinosu, Garp orchestrates a full-scale assault on the island with other sword members. Together they wreak havoc on the island and manage to save Koby, but only after Garp sacrificed his own freedom in exchange. The following day, around April 10th, the news about Koby's rescue, Garp's disappearance, and the Straw Hats on Egghead began to circulate. There were also reports of massive earthquakes around the globe that caused a significant amount of destruction and even raised the sea level by about a meter, leading to the loss of several islands. Soon, a battalion of 100 marine ships, 9 vice admirals, Admiral 𝐵𝐫𝐴𝐵, and Saint Saturn entered Egghead's territory. Seizing control of the pacifistas and the Seraphim, Saturn transforms into a monstrous being and starts hunting the Straw Hats and Vegapunk. Since Luffy was busy dealing with Lucci and 𝐵𝐫𝐴𝐵, he couldn't prevent Vegapunk's death. However, knowing that his end was near a long time prior, Vegapunk set up a video message that began to broadcast all over the world. In it, Vegapunk explained how the world is slowly sinking thanks to the use of ancient weapons by the current government. In a desperate attempt to prevent the world from finding out the truth, the other 4 members of the 𝐿𝐵𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐴 teleport to Egghead. Sensing that they're dealing with forces way out of their league, the Straw Hats realize that they need to retreat. To help them with that, the giant warrior pirates arrive on Egghead. On top of that, Bonnie also showcases the true power of her Devil Fruit by copying Luffy's abilities. Together, the Straw Hats and their allies battle against the Elders, but are ultimately unable to damage them in any meaningful way. All of a sudden, Kuma flies in and lands a satisfying punch across Saturn's face to protect his daughter. Together, they all retreat and head to 𝐿𝐵A𝐻. To help aid their escape, the Iron Giant Emmet suddenly wakes up due to Luffy's presence and uses immense Haki stored inside of it to blast the 𝐿𝐵𝐴𝐵 back to Mary Joa. At the end of it all, most of the Vegapunks are presumed dead, with only Lilith and York surviving. On their way to 𝐿𝐵A𝐻, the Straw Hats celebrate their successful escape and wind up partying a little too hard. This leads to Nami, Chopper, Usopp, Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy being abducted by a member of the new giant warrior pirates named Road. They get imprisoned inside an emulated world created by Road to satisfy his role-playing hobbies. The crew soon escapes their prison and Luffy comes across the disgraced Prince of 𝐿𝐵A𝐻, Loki.
Don't forget to check out Raid using my link in the description and claim the free starter pack today. And you can click on this video next where I created the weakest character in One Piece.